Hi you guys, welcome back. And today's video is a little bit of an exploration into millennial life. So I'm going to title it, You Know You're a British Millennial When. So I'm going to talk about things that might be distinctively familiar to anybody who is a British millennial. Let's think about this. Who remembers when Freddos were 10p and Woolworths was basically heaven on earth with the pick and mix and the CDs and tapes and magazines, and if you don't, you're either way too young, which is surprising because I don't think that's a demographic that I should be pulling in, or you blocked it out because of the trauma that now a Freddo is 35p. 35p for a Freddo. 35p. That's a lot of moolah. Who remembers shag tags or those little plastic bracelets that you used to have with like rubbery things around your wrist? And navigating around on the world, as a teenager or young person, and not necessarily having a mobile phone. So some of us might be old enough to remember going up to town on a Saturday on the bus with a fiver and being able to get a Happy Meal, Freddo, and other treats and get back just in time and still probably have change. You're the people I'm talking to in this video, and we're going to have a little deep dive, a little exploration, a little bit of a walk down memory lane, and remember the good old days of being a youth in Britain during the 90s and early noughties. So TV and tech seems like a good place to start. So you remember when it took 20 minutes to connect to the internet and there was that really like noise. I'm never doing that again, but I hope you enjoyed it. And your mum screaming at you because the only way you could be on the internet is by plugging in the landline and therefore running up a huge bill, which made a change from how you were running up the huge bill, because normally you were on the phone for ages to your friends and blocking the phone line and having to wait till after 6. So yeah, that's a good core memory of what makes you a British millennial. MSN Messenger might have been life for you. So MSN Messenger, those little emojis, the little song lyric statuses, the little kind of sitting on there, watching who was coming on, being offline when maybe you were really online. I mean, MSN Messenger was life, wasn't it? You'd change your status to something moody. I don't know, like, don't talk to me. Or you'd sort of hover when your crush was on there because you kind of wanted to see what they're up to, but maybe too shy to message them. It would sort of be on in the background a lot. And especially when I went to university, MSN was on in the background, and I'd sort of trot off to lectures and come back and then sort of see who was on there. And it was a really big part of my life. And now it's not a big part of my life. I mean, it's been replaced with other things. And let's not forget VHSs and DVDs. Do you remember the good old days of VHSs and DVDs and going to like Blockbuster or the local video shop and scouring around for ages to pick something to watch on a like Friday or Saturday night? Maybe getting a takeaway as well. It was kind of exciting, and you knew it was the weekend and you felt really happy and relaxed. And then obviously having to rewind the tapes. Those of you old enough to remember rewinding the tapes. But yeah, that was good. That was a fun thing. Going to get the media in itself was a pretty exciting experience. So there's lots of really good stuff. But TV in particular, I thought was pretty great. So you might remember the original Gladiators with Wolf, Jet, and Shadow. I met Shadow once. He came to visit a local town marketplace, and I don't think they anticipated the number of crowds they were going to get. So I ended up going with my nana, God bless her soul. And we ended up getting crushed against a white van as everybody sort of like chasing Shadow, who actually hadn't seemed to have brought that much security with him. And the youth of the 90s were sort of very excited to see this kind of very low list celebrity in their local vicinity. So yeah, that was a kind of a cool memory for me and my sibling that we remember from our childhoods. And obviously it was kind of an event, wasn't it? You knew it was Saturday night when Gladiators was on. Eureka would be there, Jet would be flipping her hair. It would all be good times. Blind Date as well. And that was classic Cilla Black. So obviously I'm a bit of an elder millennial. So if you're a younger millennial, might not remember Blind Date. And you might have oh, what was that other show? No Likey, No Lighty? Maybe that was what you remembered as your dating show. And I remember Noel's House Party. I loved Noel's House Party. Never quite got Mr. Blobby, but I did kind of enjoy watching, lots of distinctive British culture pop up on this magazine style show on a Saturday night. I mean, equally, kids' TV was great, wasn't it? Because we didn't have like 24 hours streaming. We didn't have like particularly, places on the internet for us to go. It was an emerging technology, wasn't it? The internet. In fact, you sort of go on, send an email, and there weren't like, there wasn't a Wikipedia, there wasn't a YouTube. Online shopping wasn't great until sort of maybe the sort of 2005 onwards. So, millennials that were sort of zennial or mid millennials were probably, still very much linked to watching terrestrial television for their entertainment. So I loved watching Live and Kicking on a Saturday morning. I loved watching CD UK. I actually got to go on CD UK and it was a bit of a cringy experience. I think I've mentioned this. I thought I was going to be at the front of the audience to watch the Backstreet Boys, and I wasn't. I was at the front of the audience to clap on and cheer the Crazy Frog. And if you know about the Crazy Frog, you know how embarrassing that would be. GMTV was also part of CDUK, wasn't it, with Cat, Ant and Dec, which was just hilarious and really high energy, really vibrant and fun. But then there were also really good serious dramas like Black Grove, Grange Hill, Children's Hospital. Does anybody remember that one? And my personal favourite, which probably, again, dates me as an elder millennial, was Press Gang. I loved Press Gang. Press Gang was amazing. I wanted to be Julia Sawalha, and I really bought into Dexter Fletcher's American accent. I really recommend that you go and find Press Gang, because I think it's one of the single best TV series for young people that probably, I've ever seen. And I still do watch children's TV now, especially because I've got my own kids, and because sometimes children's TV is just really cool. So I definitely would recommend watching that again. And I suppose it just depends what TV you remember watching. Maybe you grew up watching Tracy Beaker. I know she's a mum now. Yep, she's a millennial mum. Hello, Tracy Beaker. Welcome to being an adult. But obviously you fall on a millennial spectrum, and the millennial spectrum starts with zennials. So those that kind of overlapping Gen X and millennials, so the elder millennials. Then obviously we've got our mid millennials, core millennials, proper millennials. And then we've got our little Gen Z overlappers, our zillennials, who kind of sort of hop between the two and will still be part of our millennial culture, but also have their foot in that Gen Z culture as well. So definitely some cool TV. So obviously let me know what TV you were watching, depending on which millennial you were. Sick and nights out. Yes, the youth were going out. We went out, didn't we? Millennials went out. And I don't mean like over the age of 18 going out drinking in the clubs. I mean under the age of 18, maybe drinking outside of the youth clubs. And also the nappy nights. Now, does anyone else remember nappy nights? So nappy nights were where nightclubs called things like Time and Space or Liquid, or I don't know, I'm trying to think, Fatties. There's a range of random nightclub names in the 90s and early noughties, would offer, maybe on one of their quietest nights, like a Tuesday where they weren't getting the students in, it wasn't Friday or Saturday to get the big like adults in. So they would open up their premises to the underage people. And I remember going to these nappy nights. I think predominantly for me, it was sort of 13, 14, 15 maybe, because by the time I was 16, don't tell anybody, you could actually get into clubs in Britain. In the late 90s, early noughties, age wasn't maybe as strict as it is now. So I did actually get into the adult club when I was 16. But when I was 13, 14, young 15, I did frequent clubs that had like nappy nights, and you'd go there, you'd go in your best Topshop outfit, your best new look outfit, and you dance to, quite frankly, the oddest music ever, because there'd be a little bit of mix of everything. I remember dancing to a bit of pop, obviously, standard, Backstreet's Back, all right. And then a bit of dance, I mean, you're supposed to dance music, Don't Stop Moving. And then maybe some grunge would come on, and you'd be a bit like, okay, not sure about this. And then indie might come on, and obviously happy hardcore. And I remember people, I mean, again, I'm a northern millennial, so maybe if you were a southern millennial, this was slightly different. But I remember like the boys would go nuts when the happy hardcore would come on. Like sometimes their shirts would be whipped off and the arms would be going, and it would be quite a crazy 5 minutes of being really hyped up. I mean, maybe that has something to do with like the, you know, soft drinks that they were serving. I mean, like there's a lot of Diet Coke roaming around, and we all know how caffeinated, and that can rile kids up with the sugar as well. And yeah, this would all happen between the hours of 7 and 9. Because your mum and dad would then come and pick you up and take you home, because you'd obviously have to go to school the next day. So it wasn't a big raucous thing. It'd also probably snog somebody. I love the word snog. Snog is a classic word, isn't it? So you might all get off, which was also another 90s word. Not sure if you were getting off with people in the early noughties. Tell me if you are a cool millennial, whether you were still using that phrase then. But yeah, you'd usually like, you know, have a little cheeky kiss with somebody, maybe from your school, maybe from another school, because it'd be like a mix. And then you'd, as I said, go home and never see them again. So good times. And then when we hit our teens, Alco Pops were a big thing. I remember Alco Pops kind of hitting the market in the 1995. Was it Hooch in Britain that I remember being the first one? And I remember all the controversy on the TV channels as they were talking about how it was going to encourage youth drinking, which I might have done. And they came in lots of like flavors, and they were fruity. So obviously millennials were the first people to have these alcoholic pop drinks. And that kind of grew up with us, because I remember in my sort of early noughties drinking a VK, a Reef, a Bacardi Breezer. So even in my early kind of late teens, early 20s, when I was actually going out properly, they were the beverages that you could drink. There was even an Archer's one as well. So yeah, that was quite cool. There was a lot of snake bite and black. I mean, that was a millennial drink. Do people still drink that? I mean, I know if you go to a certain university, it's nasty, and you probably are still drinking it. If you know, you know. But yeah, I think that was around. Again, is that northern? I don't know. Maybe it was different. If you're a southern millennial, please feel free to comment and tell me differently. So yeah, it was an era of fun, alco pops, being able to go into nightclubs when you were very, very young and questionable. And the music was great, wasn't it? Maybe your school disco, if you're a younger millennial, were playing the Cha-Cha Slide, Five, Keep On Moving. Maybe you were like dancing some kind of routine. But you know, maybe Westlife are on. You know, Westlife were obviously part of most of our millennial experience. Love them or hate them, they were around at this time, as were an array of other boy bands as well. For elder millennials, it was the mixtape era for music, wasn't it? So you'd sit there on a Sunday night with the tape player, recording your favourite songs off the UK Top 40 that would be played on BBC Radio 1 and local radio as well. And seeing what was number one. And number one was a big deal. Getting to number one was that really exciting, and there wasn't any other way of sort of consuming the content. So that's why the top 40 was really good. And it was like a really youth culture kind of thing to listen to on the radio. We were listening to the radio, weren't we? Obviously, early Brit pop was amazing. Talked about this. We had Oasis, Blur, Pulp, Ash, you know, Charlatans. There was just so many really great bands, like guitar bands around. And that led to people like the Arctic Monkeys as well. So they were really great. The Libertines as well. They were really cool. So a lot of millennial youth will remember those. So indie or guitar music, I'm just going to branch that all together rather than being very specific to genre, was really, you know, and I think it's been referenced as indie sleaze now, the kind of noughties version of that. And this millennial sleaze is coming back, and sort of, you know, think Skins, parties, that kind of vibe, wearing grotty makeup and a glittery dress and having smudged eyeliner. There were also like raves, you know, people raving in caves in the sort of early 90s. And then obviously I think raves were still going on. Getting to Ibiza, going on your first girly holiday to Ibiza, Ministry of Sound CDs, because everything was about like, you know, dance music. And then teen discos, you know, maybe we'll listen to a bit Take That or Spice Girls. if you were a very young millennial in your little primary discos. But yeah, there was a real variety of music. And later, the music wasn't on a mixtape, was it? The music became sort of downloaded off places like LimeWire, and then you sort of make a mixed CD because you'd burn it, because you could buy your blank CDs, burn them, and then play them in your car. But then sometimes they would play in your car, and then sometimes you'd format it wrong and it wouldn't play in your car, and then you'd be really frustrated. So yeah, that was also key millennial culture as well. So yeah, real good range of music. We had a good era for music, the millennials did. It was fun. Okay, so obviously millennial fashion is sort of coming back now, but British millennial fashion, the Kappa tracksuit, that was a big thing, and poppers on the Kappa tracksuit. Now, I wasn't one for the Kappa tracksuit, but I definitely remember a lot of girls having them and being a bit like, okay, that's fine. Obviously, I was into jeans and the vest top and the denim jacket. You know, let's face it, at one point I might have looked a little bit like Bewitched at the end of the 90s. Kickers shoes, yeah, British high school kickers. That was a huge, everybody had a pair of kickers. They were just life, weren't they? Umbro coats as well, like those football manager coats. I remember them being around a lot as well when I was at school. Shopping in places like Tammy Girl. Does anybody remember Tammy Girl? I think that kind of disappeared in the late noughties when Etam shut, but Tammy Girl as a millennial sort of late 90s was definitely there. And then New Look, I think, is a mainstay. And to be fair, I think New Look's still pretty much a mainstay for a lot of even like Gen Z culture and maybe Gen Alpha, because my daughter's just about discovering New Look now. So history repeats itself. Maybe you had the Moschino belts, maybe you had those boho belts, that boho style that was kind of around in the early noughties as well. Lots of floaty tops. Ooh, I'm a bit floaty top today. And then school accessories, the gel pen, scented erasers. And I was from the era of the troll pencil toppers, and trolls were a big thing when I was a very young child. So I don't know, into trolls with having the little coloured hair, and you could get them on necklaces, and there were rave dummies as well. I've talked about shag tags. They were also fashion and style. And getting your nail polishes. Oh, was it spectacular nail polish? That was cool millennial for me, going into like your shops and buying all of the different color nail polish. And that came about because of, was it Hard Candy, which was actually quite an expensive brand, but I think that came out in 1995. And I've heard this story that Alicia Silverstone wore this blue Hard Candy nail polish, and then this sort of like craze of having different coloured nail varnishes erupted in the sort of late 90s, early noughties, having these funky different like nail polishes. So it was really cool to go up on the weekend and buy a new nail polish. I remember really loving and enjoying that. Had fluffy pens. Fluffy pens were life. Jane Norman bags and record bags. I was explaining this to my daughter the other day. I had a little Miss Giggles record bag, and I felt the bee's knees with my record bag. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Lots of teen trends like the butterfly clips, combat trousers. I've talked about combat trousers. I remember going out wearing combat trousers tucked into knee boots around about 2005. I mean, I must have looked. But equally, combats with Adidas trainers. Was it this? What were they? Stan Smiths that we would wear with them? I'll have to check in on that. But yeah, combats with that, and the vest top with the combats. Vest tops were all around. So that was a big thing. And there was a bit of a sort of an 80s revival in the early noughties for the millennial fashion. And then going out tops and a nice pair of jeans and pointy stiletto shoes. There was lots of pointy toes in the early noughties. I remember being like big and being worn. And obviously the quiff, like I used to quiff up my hair. I still quiff up my hair. I'm not going to stop doing that because I think it's great, especially as you can tell, I've got like this sort of fringe situation going on with the quiff, and then the quiff with the ponytail. That was it. That was key. That was key style as well. Oh, and like also there was that thing of putting like concealer on your lips and having the nude lip. Does anybody remember doing that? I mean, I know these are all female, but like boy trends. Ben Sherman shirts. Yeah, there's a lot of Ben Sherman shirts going around. I remember those being kind of big in millennial British culture as well. Tracksuits. I mean, tracksuits always kind of there, aren't they? And there was a bit of festival style. Like festival became very big, didn't it, for us millennials, especially in the noughties? I mean, um, Glastonbury Rallies, Flower Crowns, Indie Teas, can you name all the albums? And Topshop kind of fashion and that Kate Moss era when she was at Topshop as well. So there was lots of cool style going around. So hopefully you can remember a few of these things and wearing a couple of these bits when you were at school as well. And I'm going to just quickly talk about IT, the internet, and technology again. Obviously, I've talked about MSN. We talked about that chats and cryptic statuses and all of that. But we also were the generation that had the first mobile phone. So I remember having a mobile phone as an elder millennial when I was in year 11 at school. It was a brick. I could have knocked somebody out with it. But it was quite cool. And I remember sending my first text message to my bestie and being like, oh my God, this is so cool. I can like message you, because she was on holiday. It was Easter and she'd been staying with a friend and she'd discovered how to do it. So she sent me a message and we were like messaging. It was 10p a text. I remember that. And then obviously the Nokias sort of hit hard, didn't they? Everyone had a Nokia 3310. Everybody was playing on Snake. And then that sort of emerging into polyphonic ringtones. And you could buy polyphonic ringtones by, sending a code. And it was really like cool, these polyphonic ringtones. And then color screens, everybody loved having, and flip phones, like, yeah. And then the Crazy Frog, that seems to be a big part of this video today, bigger than I anticipated. But yeah, the flip phones, the Motorola Razr, that sort of came next. So yeah, we were really, embracing mobile phones. And maybe just about at the end of it, so as I said, Zillennials, were you on the BB, BlackBerry Messenger? That was a big thing, and that was pinging around. A lot of kids had Blackberries before the iPhone arrived in 2009. So obviously, I think we really had a variety of different phones and lots of different quirks. Learning that text lingo. I mean, millennials created text speak, didn't they? Like, well done us. We did great there. And, abbreviating everything. MySpace. Do you remember choosing your top 8 friends? And like the fact that you would pick 8 people that were your top friends and then you design the back of your page. And I remember like having Journey, Don't Stop Believing, because I really like the Hills. And no, it wasn't the Hills, it was Laguna Beach. And Stephen had picked up Lauren on some kind of, I don't know if it was a date or not, but and that was playing on and they were singing it. And then I just loved that song. Like Journey was really big for me. And so that was like my background, and I had like sort of a black and like neon vibe going on. So yeah, MySpace. I still have a MySpace page, but you can't access it now because I think it's been shut down. I mean, can you get on MySpace? But I know I've Googled it. I've got links to, being on the internet for so long. I can find like the link to it, but the page won't display. And I can't remember my login. I mean, to be fair, I probably do know my login, but I'd like to get onto MySpace. Shall we resurrect MySpace? That would just be so cool. Like if you want Gen Z and Gen Alpha a real millennial experience, go set up a MySpace page. Like let's just revive it. Let's just bring MySpace back. Let's bring, Tumblr life back, all of that stuff. Bebo, if you're a really young millennial or zennial or zillennial, not zennial, zillennial, you'll obviously remember Bebo. I remember Bebo because I was sort of starting like my teaching career then. Oh, and like kids were on Bebo. And then download culture, this was coming. I said about illegally downloading songs at Napster, LimeWire, yeah, and then illegally ripping CDs. I don't think I mentioned how much of that was illegal. Probably should have done it in the video, but so I'll put that caveat in now. And then mini MP3 players, they were sort of around as well before the iPod arrived, and the culture and the landscape really shifted when Apple sort of ended up in that landscape and changing that. So yeah, millennials were all over the internet. We're probably still creating the apps that you're on. We are the forefathers and the forebearers of IT and apps and tech. So you know what? You can thank us. We did a great job. We walked so you could run. So far, a lot of this video could be quite generic millennial stuff. So let's bring it back down to what distinctively might make it more British or might, resonate with you as a British millennial. So maybe you were into watching or quoting Ali G. He was around there. Now I look back on it, I'm a bit like, is that appropriate? But at the time, we were all for it. Another comedy TV series, which certainly hasn't tested the test of time, was Little Britain. There's some stuff now that is a little bit questionable, but again, it was hilarious in the context of when we were watching it. And Catherine Tate as well, like I'm a bothered Lauren. That was quite fun. So those are probably things that you were watching or enjoying. I mean, for me, I also love Father Ted, a little bit older maybe than those, but and Game On as well. So again, those older millennials might remember that. My Lovely Horse, anyone? Classic Father Ted there. Watch that video. It is hilarious. We had an obsession with random humor. In fact, the word random was something we would just randomly shout at each other. I remember just being like, oh, random and just shouting random. And we also had things like llamas. Llamas were very big at one point. Drama llama. Do you remember that? And badgers, like in snakes. Yeah, memes. We were the people that created those memes, which links back to my earlier point about the internet has been shaped by us millennials. And obviously the original and best were emerging at this time in terms of memes. The fast show catchphrases. Anyone remember the catch show? Suit you, sir. Which obviously is a little bit of a pun, and we know how much I love puns. And obviously, again, the trauma of Teletubbies. I remember watching the Teletubbies for the first time. It was 1997. I was at a sleepover there with a couple of girls from school, and we had been up most of the night, and then we were waking up in the morning, sat in sleeping bags in the lounge, kids' TV was on, and then watching this giant sun baby rise over the hills, and watching these little men in coloured suits speak absolute nonsense. And I was like, what is this? It's so unusual. I just couldn't, what? Obviously, we have Gen X probably to blame for that as a TV program, because they were the makers of it. But, we millennials were watching it and probably trying to figure out what on earth. Was there some kind of study about speaking baby and encouraging children to speak? I don't know. I'm sure there's a history for it. But, in Teletubbies, everyone had cuddly Teletubbies. They were really huge. And then the tweenies. Wasn't a big fan of the tweenies. Let's not talk about the tweenies. But yeah, we had a lot of cultural references. And I think this comes back to British people would watch their TV channels. We had five terrestrial TV channels: BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, and Channel 5. And we watched a lot of our TV on there. I mean, you might have had satellite or cable, so you might have watched a bit of Sky. But during the 90s and early noughties, we were watching television and we were watching the same TV programs, and viewing figures were huge. People would tune in on Christmas Day to watch specials such as, oh God, I've forgotten Del Boy and Rodney. What was that? Only Fools and Horses, or maybe a bit later on watching specials of like Gavin and Stacey. We did like that. We did like that sort of uniformed TV that we all watched at the same time, and had those, classic references that we did share and all experience. And I think that was what was so fun, and a real lovely thing about being a millennial, or a young person during this time. Because I think if you're a young person now, you can have the same like references like kids at the moment, like 6, 7. But it kind of, no one knows what it means or where it comes from, and it doesn't have that kind of knowledge and depth that maybe the culture did when we were younger. So yeah, humor and shared references, we love them. So I'm going to end here, but I'm going to mention the Argos catalogue, because I think in the era before the internet and online shopping, the Argos catalogue deserves an honourable mention, because you would get that catalogue and circle whatever you would like at Christmas and at birthdays. And I feel like this was a rite of passage for many, not just millennial, I imagine Gen X did it too, in Britain. But yeah, that catalogue was, and the Elizabeth Duke jewellery, and, the school bags you could get from there, and, just bits of toys. It was just everything. I mean, catalogues in general are kind of a big thing, weren't they, in this pre-online shopping era? and you can sort of see what you were getting and then wait for it to get delivered or to go into the catalogue shop. I mean, there was Index as well. Does anyone remember Index? That obviously it was Argos's rival. But yeah, I feel like British people know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Argos and the catalogue. And therefore, I felt like it deserved a little part of the video, because I think a lot of us can associate with that and really appreciate that. So, an honourable mention goes to the Argos catalogue. Then, so my fellow millennials, hopefully you've enjoyed that little nostalgia trip. And there's loads more I could talk about. And you know what? I could probably have gone a lot deeper on the Britishness of it, but it would have been a very long video. So maybe we can follow this up a little bit later on. So hit like if you've ever taped off the top 40 and drop a comment if you miss Woolies and the pick and mix. And this video gave you flashbacks to Jane Norman bags, Morgan de Toy, glitter nail polish, Kappa tracksuits, then feel free to share it with your millennial mates. Subscribe because we can, follow more millennial memories together, and remember the joys of when a Freddo was indeed 10p. So I'll see you next time for more throwback chaos or some random whinge. Random, see, there it is again. Peace, love, and overpriced Freddos to you all. Ta-ta for now. Bye.